Frank. Just a couple things before we really get into it. A couple housekeeping items. Um, One, thank you, obviously, for being here. We're hoping this is a great educational session to share a lot of good information about what's going on in safety, compliance, and enforcement. Obviously, questions are encouraged. You're going to have options to do so through the Q&A button or the chat. So feel free to do either. We're going to cover as much as we can at the end of the session today. And then anything we don't get to, we'll try to follow up through an email. And then anything just for note, I don't think this is really going to come up, but if there's any reference to rates, costs, marketing strategies, etc., that doesn't reflect any specific offers from us. So I think we'll avoid that in general, but just in case, got to put that out there. So with that out of the way, I want to welcome everybody to Behind the Wheel. We're going to discuss the most recent safety, compliance, and enforcement trends in trucking. I'm Nate Rose, Strategic Account Manager here at Transflo, and I'm privileged to be joined by two friends of mine for many years who also happen to be true experts in the field of trucking safety, Scott Stofer and Jill Maschmeier. Scott is a senior product manager here at Transflo who has experience in commercial truck enforcement and is a mainstay among industry and enforcement leadership. In addition, we have one of the most experienced safety and compliance leaders in trucking, and the 2020 TCA Safety Professional of the Year, Jill Maschmeier, Director of Safety Compliance with National Carriers. And I'm kind of starting to wonder what I'm doing here with these two in my role, but I've been around trucking and fleet telematics for about 20 years. And my goal mainly is to just keep us on track today. And then I'll also help connect conversations with what I'm talking to people every day throughout the industry. So that'll be my role here. And as you probably know, Transflo is primarily known as the leader in document management and optimization across transportation. And while that's true, we're also connected to all aspects of the industry, including safety and compliance, and are active in CVSA, lending our voice as an industry leader to enforcement. Our goal today is to share what we've learned, bring to you best practices around how to be prepared for what's coming next. And then as a reminder, just feel free to ask questions and post anything that you'd like us to dig into at the end at any time. So feel free to do that.
Well, Nate, pleasure to be here. We always have good conversations around these topics. And Jill, I'm really glad that you're able to join us as well and provide the perspective from a carrier standpoint and with all your experience and actually being out there and implementing policies and having to deal with this. So I appreciate it. This is one of those topics of multiple perspectives is a good thing. It's part of the reason why I got involved with CVSA with my enforcement background and then in regulatory. It's always good to have a voice, and I'm always proud to be able to sit at the table and provide perspective from the industry. So, Jill, again, thank you again for being here. Can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. It's kind of funny though. You guys make the rules up and then we try to break them, it seems like, or our drivers do. But we can always give you that one off like, oh, you're not going to believe how this works. But all the best laid plans, they can go south pretty easy, and we're trying to get people on the right page.
It's a full-time job, right? Keeping everybody straight.
And then some.
Yeah. Well, thank you both again for being here and just sharing what you guys are living every day. We're going to do a deep dive into some of the most pressing issues that came out of CVSA workshop from April. The 4 topics are areas of focus for enforcement, which means they should be areas of discussion if you're a stakeholder in safety and compliance for a fleet. And I encourage you all to add these topics and what you learned to your next safety meeting. So just to cover it at a high level real quick, we're going to talk PC and kind of decode some of the confusion around that and some of the trouble spots that you can get into and what enforcement's doing about it. Distracted driving, ELD fraud, and human trafficking. And with that, let's start with a major point of confusion for drivers and carriers, as well as a point of scrutiny for enforcement. Personal conveyance, or PC. the idea of PC always seems pretty straightforward, right? You're driving your truck for personal reasons or for non-commercial reasons, point A to point B. Um, there's there's a little bit of gray area there that I think Scott and team are going to help us understand a little better, but it seems like a pretty simple concept when you first look at it.
It does, doesn't it? It's I mean, its core, it's using a commercial motor vehicle for personal use when you're off duty. And it sounds straightforward at first. And you know, one of the litmus tests when you're talking about it is, or am I using it for is a carrier benefiting from the movement of the vehicle or not? And but the problem is at its core, well, that's what it is. There is confusion around PC. It's something we've been talking about for seems well actually since 2017. Um, and there's outright abuse happening. So there's a combination, and confusion sometimes leads to abuse. Um, the problem that we have is it goes back to the mandate, and this kind of became as a mandate problem. Prior to the ELD mandate, there was no scrutiny on personal conveyance. Um, under paper logs, like you had to know when you can use it, when you couldn't, but uh, there was nothing that was really to record it and to scrutinize it, unless you got pulled over while you're in personal use, then you had to explain why you were doing it, right? Um, and then you flash forward to 2017 with the grandfather clause. ELD mandate comes around and says one of the key tenets is you have to account for every movement of the vehicle, right? If you look at the mandate, there's a mechanism in there for every movement. So you got odometer, you got engine hours, and you have your rods. And so if the vehicle moves, it's recorded. So you have automatic drive time, you have unidentified driving time that you have to do something with. You have yard moves and PC. So all of a sudden, now you have this mechanism that's put in place because if the vehicle moves, it has to be recorded. And then for the first time, we have something that has been dealt with through guidance and still is included in the mandate. So they'll explain to you how to in there it tells you when we need to push a button, when you need to come out of it, annotating when you're using it. The problem is that there really is no regulation though. So the hours of service, subpart A of 395 there's nothing that defines personal conveyance. If you go look at 395.8, there's no word in there for personal. So, it's something that's been regulated by guidance, still is. And for that reason, there's a lot of confusion on it. And there's ambiguity in the guidance even. If you look at the guidance in step 3, it says drive to a reasonable location, right? And reasonable is very subjective. And Joe, I'd be curious. So when a couple scenarios have come up, it's like if you tell yourself something enough times, right, you can convince yourself something's reasonable. And so, like a couple of instances, and Joe, I'm sure you've seen some stuff too. Is the driver drops his load, and he goes to go to the truck stop, but there's not the good showers there. They don't have the hot water, or whatever the thing is. But there was one 20 miles down the road, as opposed to 1 mile down the road. Is it reasonable to go because of the showers or because the potato salad's better, right? And like I said, just one example, but yeah, Joe, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's like, and then it's a driver. What's reasonable to me and reasonable to a driver is usually two totally different things. There's no limit either. You can drive like a guy, it's one of the things we find is a guy says, well, I'm out of time, but I'm going to go home for my personal time. You can really legally PC home, but really, is that guy able to drive? Is he fatigued? Is he all those kind of things? But yeah, PC is a whole different animal, but they need to notate what they're doing. And then if we have to try to decide what they're doing, you can look at it a little bit. But yeah, it should, like you say, it should be cut and dried, but no.
Yeah. Well,
they're like kids. Who knows what they're doing?
Well, then it gets really weird because there's one that's I don't think I've ever seen the clarification on, and I don't know if you run this one is, I drop my final load and I'm going home, and I stop there, and by the guidance it should be allowed, but then the house is halfway between where you are and your next pickup. So is that getting a jump on the next load, or is that going home? And I've heard that it's been written both ways.
Yeah,
But there's no,
that's tough because you got a guy that, his normal route is to do whatever, and his home is right in the middle of it. And you run the risk if you let them PC home and there's an incident or somewhere later down the road they get in trouble. Well, that's probably not exactly legal. And then they get in the truck and they want to do their own thing, and you've got to be the hammer or figure out how to do it right. So yeah, it's a challenge.
yeah,
So
and
basically, it seems like there's all this data now that wasn't there before, because now we're required to run an ELD. You're required to generate the data. You get to see where you were and where you wound up and when you use PC. Whereas before, now there's a little gray area, and kind of left the gray area in there without the consideration for all the new data that was going to be coming through that could be validated against, right?
That's
yeah, and
crazy. And then on some of the devices, they may be on PC and they'll do another function that may stop or something. I'll throw them to the drive line. And then, of course, you can't fix that once they do it. It's quite a few challenges.
yeah, and note, Nate, to your point about all of a sudden you have this data, is again, as before there was nothing there. Now all of a sudden, every time you have to use it, you have to mark it. So all of a sudden we go from nobody looking at it to every personal movement is scrutinized, right? And then the ambiguity, the guidance, and then the other side of it is there's the confusion part of it, and then there's just the it's just itching to be abused, right? It's I can move the truck small, get an hour here, get a mile there, and uh, so it's just kind of it's out there, and I'm going to try and get away with it because it could be several days, and then you have to pull apart. It's only a mile, so it's one of those things that's just been an issue. It's been talked about. We've sent it back to FMCSA. I could tell you other organizations have asked for better guidance, asked for it to be either put in better guidance or put in the regulations. And FMCSA up till now has denied doing anything with it. I think in 22 when CVSA asked, they said, "Get me more data," and so that's what they did actually in 23. So they finished the study, and we just went through it, and I'll give you some numbers. It's kind of interesting. So in 2021, after the first time they asked, PC related false logs was the 60th most cited violation. By 2023, it was the 24th most cited violation. That's a significant jump, right? So it's becoming a bigger issue. And so in 23, they did a study. They went out, they did 41,000 inspections looking to scrutinize PC in those inspections. And of all the inspections they did that did use PC, what they ended up with was 38% of the inspections showed incorrect use of PC. That's a big number,
Yeah.
incorrectly using PC, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy. And there's a couple of things they're working on, but one in particular that there was a lot of discussion on is they are going to petition them again with the data, look for a time cap.
Time cap. So that meaning rather than distance like it's done in Canada, a cap on time. So that's how you'd be regulated, right?
Yeah. So they're gonna take the data, petition, and what the agreement was a policy committee, and I'm primarily mostly involved in driver traffic, but policy picked it up as well because we talk about it in both places. And the vote was to ask for a 2-hour time cap. There's a few other things apparently that I think they've done in ad hoc, but yeah, that's the idea, is put 2 hours on it, ask them to do something with it, and they're gonna send that back, and we'll see if third time's a charm.
Is that during the workday or is that during the consecutive 2 hours?
It's 2 hours. It's throughout the workday, so it doesn't have to be consecutive. So you can use it to go to the motel. You can then go back to work, and then if you have to go somewhere else, you can use it, but it would be a maximum of 2 hours in a day, so spread out over the day. Similar to in Canada, they do 75 kilometers a day, so they did distance, and so you can use it several times during the day, but once you hit the 75-kilometer limit, then that's it. And the one thing with this is there's a little bit different issue here is in Canada they codified it. They put it into regulation. So they have it in the ELD mandate, and then they actually put it into the hours of service regulation that tells you exactly what you can or can't do, how the truck has to be unladen, bobtailed, and you at 75 kilometers, the system has to switch you out of it by regulation. So that's what they're looking to do, and hopefully that'll get us somewhere.
Yeah. Easier. Then if it's a kind of a cut and dried rule, we find our guys, if they misbehave, we'll just take it off so they can't use it.
Yep.
Jill, do you think it matters between time and distance, like from a carrier standpoint, like what's more convenient or easier to manage for you guys, do you think?
Oh, we tried it a couple different ways. I don't know if there's any easy way to do, because I'll try to find a workaround, whether it's miles or distance. We've had 25 miles as the distance in the past. So I don't know. The verdict's still out on that. What works?
Fair enough. I'm assuming you all have pretty good policies in place for PC usage.
We do, and then we run a report daily to make sure that we don't have those bad actors that are misbehaving. And then we'll go in as far as even look and see, where they're at, make sure they're not working. Because we obviously don't want to find that out on the roadside or after we've had a bad accident during the audit. That's horrible.
Oh, 100%. And you touched on something I'll get into, because I was getting the policy piece of it is, because one of the things I always say is make sure you have because of PC being what it is the carrier can have a policy that is more strict than the regulation. You have to, manage it internally, but yeah, make sure that all the limitations that whatever your company is going to have, make sure they're crystal clear. Going so far, I've always said, even so far as to have training on how to annotate, because that's supposed to be the reason for doing it. And then the other part of it is you touched on disabling and enabling it. That is one of the key things that I always tell people should be part of your auditing process, right? Is the thing with PC and Yard Move, both of them, is it's one of the few places in the mandate where they put a lot of the responsibility on the carrier, where the majority of it is on the driver in most other places. But if you look at the mandate, you're required to enable or disable it. The driver can't. So I always say, look at that, and if somebody's not using it correctly, as part of your policy and part of the follow-up and the policing of it, is disable it. That's kind of one of those things, is somebody's not using it correctly and you leave it, when you continue to let them use it, that's kind of, how do you,
shame on
do
you.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yep. So
just a couple last notes on this topic from kind of to talk our book just for a second. We have some tools that can help you maintain compliance with PC through our team. So first, ELD through Transflo is done with Geotab. They're the largest ELD provider in North America. They're very quick to adapt regulations changes. We've got tools just embedded in that help you manage and activate and deactivate PC, and you got limits you can do. So that's you'll be covered if things change. You've got tools now to manage it against your policies that you make. In addition, at Transflo, we have some specialized tools. One is PC monitoring, so you could automate the ability to see if a PC ends in specific zones, so a customer zone or a business zone of any kind. You can flag that and automatically see if a driver's misusing PC. And then secondarily, we can do an in-cab pop-up that would remind drivers of your policy and what the right times to use PC are, and even how to annotate. So a couple of things you can do through us now. If you're not already doing it, talk to our team or whoever you talk to with Transflo to help you get set up for that. And just a couple of things that I want to make sure that was out there for our users or anybody interested. Great conversation on PC. Appreciated that. And good insights. We're going to move next to distracted driving. This is a topic that just seems to be increasingly visible and a major problem. It's not just distracted driving, like picking up your phone and looking at it. We're talking about reports of people on laptops streaming movies, FaceTiming somebody, etc. Jill and I know we're both just at the TCA safety event just a couple weeks ago, and in the driver of the year presentation, I think they all mentioned noting an increase of distracted driving that they see, whether it's four-wheelers or trucks, truck drivers on the road. So it's something that for me as somebody with a family that's on the road more often than not, it's just scary to think about somebody driving an 80,000-pound vehicle, distracted driving. So I'll hand that off to you guys for comment.
Gary, that seems like an understatement. That's terrifying, right? It's terrifying to think of somebody driving on the road, 80,000-pound truck, watching the latest episode of The Mandalorian or FaceTiming with their significant other, right? I mean, and then all of a sudden there's a traffic jam. And I mean, just the entire thing is just, it's crazy. And there's enough distractions as it is. And now this is a thing. And this, as you heard about it at the conference, they also brought it to the driver traffic. And the thing was, it's become such an issue that they're looking at how to address it. And it turns out that the regulation doesn't actually, it's outdated. So it's 39388 supposed to be the thing to cover it. But once they looked at it, the reality of it is it's very specific. Something that was put in the 90s is about TV. So the way the regulation is today, it only covers TV broadcasts. And the regulation hasn't kept up with technology, and things like streaming, video communication. Those things aren't covered in it. And so, yeah, and it's expected to be a growing issue considering the industry is trying to bring in a younger generation of drivers. They're tech savvy, mobile users, so it's not going anywhere. And that's one of the things we here at Transflo, because we do one of a massive mobile ecosystem, is it's also part of that discussion is, yes, things are mobile, but you also have to make sure you're talking about how to responsibly use them for the right things. But it's a thing, and it did come to the committee, and there was a discussion on this on how to deal with it.
I can't imagine there's a lot of drivers with an antenna TV in the truck. Maybe I'm mistaken on that, but I don't think that rule is right for today.
I'm sure that somebody's going to come forward with it, but
Right.
yeah, and they are going to. So just so everybody knows, after reviewing, there's two things that are going to come out of it, and the ops policy has already been updated. So the way it's being addressed right now is it's going to be handled under 39017 proper equipment use on a CMV, and they'll notate it if they cite for it. Just so everybody's aware that if that comes up, that will be what you'll see, and it is in Ops Policy 15 already. They've updated it, and it's being used in enforcement now. And then the second part of it is they will be petitioning FMCSA to update the regulation, because it needs to keep up with technology. The technology and so forth is moving quicker than the regulation is. And I gotta ask you, have you all had to deal with this, or are you seeing it? Are you addressing this? Because like, this is a scary, terrifying thing.
Driving, texting while driving, that's huge. That'll get you an instant ticket out of here.
Yes.
Or
That's
talking on the
covered.
phone.
Yeah.
But the video and the audio part, you can find out some of that. We have outward facing cameras, but if someone has an incident or accident, you can hear what's going on in the cab. So sometimes you can hear, wonder if they're talking to somebody, or if if they're watching a video. There's all different kinds of distractions. Hell, you could be eating dinner and you spill it on yourself and you have a wreck. But it's terrifying. The texting and driving, though, if you drive just a few minutes down the road, you can see a number of people just in a few minutes texting, and it's so scary because they've got to look away from the wheel to do their thing. It's terrible.
And that's the thing with texting is, and that goes to the same thing, is they did take into account using a mobile device for those sorts of things, but again, nobody saw this one coming. But yeah, it's one of it's one of those things. Somebody's asked me, how would you approach this? Well, first off, zero tolerance. Like the danger is so great, and at the very least, and it's the first step, and it's kind of passive. But if you find one of these violations coming through, you got to take action on it. Like the danger is so massive with this.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they come up with, but there should be some, it'd be nice to have some type of device that it disables those things so they can't do it going down the road. But that's that may be in the future.
Yeah. Right now, I'm just glad they're going to finally take it up so that there is some way to handle it when it's done, and especially when we have no idea what the next piece of technology is going to come, going to come along and add to that.
Yeah, and it seems like the only 100% sure way to monitor for this is if you've got that inward facing camera, but it's a challenge to get drivers on board with that, and I think you can recognize how that's a disadvantage compared to other fleets if it's not something that's required. So um,
Yeah, it is, but that's why now that it's being exposed, it's want to make sure everybody's aware that this is out there and start thinking about it if you haven't already.
there was a question in the chat relevant about teams. How are teams implementing a policy for cell phone usage? Jill, I know you guys run some teams. Do you have any uh, rules around that?
Well, it's just we have to have a hands-free device. So that's that. If they're a passenger in the passenger seat, I'm not sure if you can control that. So I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of camera and also and it's kind of like similar to that. To your point on that, it's very similar to like if you're in a team, you can log in and use the ELD and unlock it, but if the driver's logs in, he can't, right? So there is this understanding that passengers there is some allowance for that. But yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Let's jump to the next item, which is something that we've seen increase as well across the industry, and it's basically one misuse of technology to another, ELD fraud. Um, in the old days, this was drivers carrying more than one paper logbook or fudging some of the data to stay in compliance. Not can't quite do it that way anymore, at least in most cases. So, what are things that fleets are doing out there, fleets, drivers, driver managers, etc., potentially that would be considered ELD fraud, running illegally?
So there's two things that are happening when it comes to fraud, and both of them are kind of they're gaining a lot of um, attention. First one is using the ELD to kind of game the system, and we've seen it a lot on the driver's side, but we also seen some on the carrier side too. What they're seeing is ELDs were part of the intention of DLDs was to try and uh, stop some of this, some of the stuff that went on with paper logs. And I'm going to say right off the bat, we are safer with ELDs than we were with paper logs. But it's technology, and you give somebody enough time and they spend enough time messing with it, they'll find ways to try and circumvent things. So the biggest things we're seeing is PC. Obviously, we just talked about that. There's the whole ghost driver issue, which is creating false profiles, and then basically swapping log in, log out, continue moving because you have two drivers and two sets of logs. Not accepting unidentified driving time is another good one. Basically, just not accepting and letting it sit, and then hope it burns off in 7 days. And the ghost driver thing is probably the biggest issue that's been talked about nowadays, and that everybody's trying to combat. And I mean, down to the thing of drivers, either they have access to make a profile, or they know somebody in the back office that does it for them. And you have a profile with their real name and driver's license. You have a second profile with their name with one letter difference and a DL number 1 letter difference. And then they get pulled over and they're under the fake profile and they say, well, somebody keyed in my information wrong, right? Or whatever that is. And the other one is my favorite one is I'm using a false driver and I'm operating as a team. And then all of a sudden I get pulled over, even though there's only one of me in the truck. And when I first heard this, I was like, really, somebody said this? And apparently it's happened more than once, is they pull somebody over and and the driver says, or the inspector says, where's your co-driver? And he says, well, I just dropped him off 3 miles back at the truck stop. Like, huh? So somebody's put some thought into this, because I mean, you come off the top of your head with that, but this is actually being said, and then it's going to try and prove whether or not there actually was somebody there, and you just contracted with them to drive for you. But yes, this is happening. This is a thing. And then that being said, there is a secondary side of this that's now starting to show its head, and this came up last year, and now it's being talked about some more. Is there is this growing concept of ELDs that have been registered and are being used, that were built with back doors, trap doors, support mechanisms that will update your logs for you. And it came up last year, and at first it was like, wow, I mean, somebody's really doing this and building a system just for that purpose. And then they've done some studies, and they found where logs are too perfect, and they found some other things out there. A study they did in Oregon. And so this is a thing that's going too. And I guess when you look at it, there's a reason why there's 1,031 ELDs as of yesterday on the U.S. registry, which is self-certified, and there's about 170, I think, in Canada. So that's a big disparity. And so kind of once you think about it, and once you start seeing it, it kind of lends itself that may lend itself to why there's so many of them out there trying to get their few dollars. But this is something I think everybody needs to be aware of. And we are lucky in that we are partnered with Geotab, one of the biggest telematics providers. But if anybody's out there that's, and somebody is going a different path, I would say make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure they're reputable, understand who they are. I would even go so far as say check Canada. Are they registered there? It's another tool in the toolbox, right? And I would say to anybody out there, if somebody says they can edit drive time for you, or they have the ability, their system does, I go someplace else. I can't say that. I mean, that's always been the question since the mandate started, was that's the golden goose, but it's not a real thing. So, then there's the whole auditing of your make sure that you have permissions and you know who's able to create profiles and everything. And Joe,
I think
Yep.
I was going to just say quick. I think it goes without saying, whatever level of an organization would support this kind of behavior, has to get driven out of the industry one way or another, right? And the more that enforcement can do to track it down and enforce this kind of an issue, definitely would benefit everybody. It's challenging even from a reputable ELD provider like we are, because we can't control what you're going to do, who you're going to allow access to. We don't go into it expecting a carrier to do this kind of a thing. So obviously there's some of those systems that would do that, but it's just sort of challenging from the provider standpoint. So you really kind of need that internal monitoring to know, what are your drivers doing? What are your people that are set up drivers doing? Keep some idea of the inventory of who's doing what and how. So yeah, I'm curious to hear, Jill, like what all you guys do to watch for that. Like even a reputable carrier, if you're not paying enough attention to what's happening at the low level, you could get drivers getting away with this potentially.
Yeah, it happens, and we try so hard every day to try to do it right. And you still got those bad actors. A couple things that we found, which is kind of funny. We had a guy driving down the road, and his name was Bugs Bunny, was his team driver, and that's a name we use in orientation to try to teach our people how to how to log in, those kind of things. Like, what the heck? So yeah, we released him to the industry. But just you'll find people that'll just do the darndest things just to try to make an extra buck. And I understand that to a point, but we still got to play with the rules. And we also have people that will somehow figure out some way to disable their device. So they have to go to paper. And then, oh, by the way, they drive a lot more than they should. And, that didn't take very long. We catch that, but that's real. And people, not so much now, but years ago when we first started dealing with the ELD, yeah, it was kind of a common thing.
yeah,
And the unified driving miles, you put those all back on there. So once you get it locked down pretty good, you've only got 2 or 3 people you really got to watch close, and they will either conform or they'll go away. So
That's a good point about unidentified driving, because that's one of those ones that can slip by you or seem like a bear to manage. And I think from a carrier standpoint, I've seen some that they sort of lose the track of taking care of it. And then all of a sudden it starts to mount up on you, and then it gets harder and harder to manage and more of a bear. And then they really have to like deliberately decide to get control of it. And if drivers realize you're not going to be
Okay.
managing it effectively, they'll take advantage of that and use it against you. So that's a great one, just for if you're one of those carriers and maybe hasn't been keeping as close an eye on it as you could. That's when you've got to get a plan around.
And the thing for everybody to consider, that everybody out there listening, is it also adds a extra layer because of all of fraud and the bad actors, as well as, on the ELD side, because part of the investigation, inspectors are now scrutinizing logs for any anomalies. I will tell you that part of that study, one of the things that came out of it was they were finding the logs were so perfect, looking like that on a graph, but then they found that, the stop was in Albuquerque, then the next stop that looked perfect on the graph was somewhere in Texas. And they are going to update the out of service to say if the logs are tampered with to a point that you cannot tell if somebody's taken an actual rest break or not, and they're so messed up, they're going to add that into the out of service criteria for next year. So something to be considered, and also just with the added scrutiny, it's even more of a reason to make sure that everything's tightened up and PC usage and all of it, because they're out there looking for stuff.
Is
It's
the
making
out
it
of
difference.
service, is that for the driver or for the company? If they can't match the log up?
It's for the driver.
Yeah,
It's for the driver
and it
because
should be.
they have no idea where it came from. I'm sure if there was some way to acknowledge it was carrier, but it's the driver, right? And they're not handling their logs, and it goes back to the drivers. It's driver's primary responsibility for managing the logs and make sure the logs are accurate. So yeah, that's what they're planning on doing with that, because it's
Well,
because of the manipulation so bad.
we find too on the logs when we do we have a guy, maybe they're written up for a split log. A lot of times the officers, same as ourselves, don't understand how that really works. And so I encourage everybody to really look at the write-ups they get just to make sure they are correct on both parts.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, so I do want to clarify that there is, anytime that there's a problem with the logs, it's false logs, right? And it's one of those terms that everybody doesn't like, but it's anything where there's a problem with the logs. If there's a problem with the logs, something's missing, whatever, that's not going to be out of service. They're adding a second footnote that's specifically for it's manipulated so bad that there's absolutely no way to untie it once you start investigating. So I want to make sure that was clear, that this isn't just all of a sudden any problem with the logs is going to be an out of service criteria. So
Good point.
There's one last thing on that topic before we move on to our last planned topic is we do have some customized tools again around unidentified driving specifically available. So if you're a Transflo Geotep ELD user, we can implement that for you. So if you have questions, just gives you some additional insight to like slice and dice the data and to more easily manage the unidentified driving. So if that's something that's interesting, just reach out to your reps or Scott and we can help point you in the right direction. And with that, our final topic for today, and the most important really, is human trafficking. It's a dark reality, and trucking is kind of in the middle of it just by the nature of the industry. It kind of lends itself to being abused for that reason. So, Scott, could you just kind of give us an idea of the scope and the information you have available and kind of what
yeah,
what we're suggesting?
Yeah, this is one of the topics we always want to bring up and remind people, keep it visible, right? It's a problem. It's as you said, trucking industry is an unwitting victim of this because of its nature. We talk about it. We continue to educate, and if you look at the numbers, so I will say ahead of time, they're still compiling the numbers what it looks like in North America, but when you look at the international numbers, total, everything, the UN International Labor Organization, they estimate 27.6 million people, and there are some estimates that go up to 50 million people are being trafficked, and they are generally in two categories. 77% of what they know is in forced labor, and then the other 23 is in sex trafficking. So these are big numbers, and it's a big problem. And I also will also mention that I think about 35% of that is children. So serious problem, bad issue, and something that I think we all need to be aware of. And I will say this, that I think when you hear that term human trafficking, there's this idea that it's people packed in the back of a truck and crossing a border or being transported from point A to point B, and it's not. It's right in the cab as well, right? It's sometimes it's somebody being sex trafficked and sitting in the cab of the truck. So it's not the classic view of what I think some people may think about it. And to that end, there is some stuff that we've been doing. We've asked FMCSA. One of the things that we've been working on and pushing for TAT, driver traffic, is an update to 39260, and this is the regulation on requiring written permission to have a passenger in the truck. It's not assigned by the carrier. And the guidance from FMCSA that's longstanding is that it has to be kept at the place of business. One of the couple of scenarios that's come up that we've talked about started last year. We started talking about this in this sense. The scenario is, I'm an inspector. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I pull a truck over. There's what looks to be an underage youth in the passenger seat. I talk to the driver. I ask about if they have permission, and they say yes. It's 3 o'clock in the morning now. Do you have your number for your dispatch? Can you give it to me? They call, and somebody on the other end of the phone, who knows who it is, right, picks up and says they're dispatch. Could be part of whatever organization or ring they're working with. Says yes, we have written permission. It's fine. And then at that point, that line of inquiry, they can still investigate, but that line of inquiry kind of gets shut down, right? It's like that's one tool in the toolbox that's gone, and they can still investigate. But one of the things that we've asked, and it's a very simple thing, and it's around the guidance, not even the regulation, is we've asked FMCSA to update their guidance to require the permission slip to be in the truck, whether it's electronic or written. And we think it's a simple ask to give another tool to an inspector to investigate and work to combat human trafficking. FMCSA hasn't done anything with this to date, but we did ask again, and I think we're gonna continue to ask. I would encourage anybody that's passionate about this topic to reach out and ask them to update that guidance. We all pledge to work towards that ourselves in driver traffic and industry and enforcement. So it's an issue, and I think it's something that we kind of all need to combat. Joe, have you know of anybody that's run into this issue, or what's your thoughts on the whole permission slip thing? I mean,
Well, within the company, we will, if they have a passenger, they have to be over 5 years of age, and we have a sheet, and they have one in our main office. We have one in the truck also. And if it's a child, we'll make sure there's permission from the parents, those kind of things. Extra cautious with people that are maybe a single person that has a small child in the truck, or anybody. I mean, you can be abused or a victim. It didn't really matter. There's really no age. It could be even the elderly. That's where kind of a missing link.
It's true.
Yeah, but we try to be extra cautious, especially with children, though, just to make sure that there's no bad actors out there. We had an incident years ago where a guy, there was something up. So we ended up calling our local law enforcement, and he was a child predator that had a child that was not his, and we got him sent away. But yeah, everybody needs to be in tune with that, because a lot of times, especially now that I'm older, you kind of can pick up on some of those. Just if it feels bad, if it feels off, it's probably off. Ask some questions.
See something,
So,
say something, right? Like they say in the airport.
Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly right.
And my other comment too is I also want to throw this out there to everybody is get training. There was a great organization, Truckers Against Trafficking, TAT. They're a big advocate. We work with them every year. They're there at CVSA, always educating, always finding new ways to get this problem out there. They have great tools. They have great training materials. Utilize them. The more people have this, the more chance we have of combating the issue. So I want to put that out there. It's a major issue, and I want to make sure that we keep talking about it until it's handled.
We in fact use that in our orientation and make sure everyone reviews that, and every year, and then every year we'll kind of have another snapshot of it. We in fact have gone as far as we've had stickers on the side of our trucks. And that way, if there's some young person that's at a truck stop that feels in danger, they know that possibly maybe our people can help. Yep.
And I also know we are working on some things to try and from Transflo standpoint, how we can work towards that, but that's more to come on that. Some things we're working on in the background.
So I think as daunting of a subject that is and is scary, I think that the hope is the more that you can talk about it, the more that you can educate drivers and just be aware of what's going on out there. And then I think the regulation comes in to help enforce that it's a little more concretely valid, that you've got someone in the truck with you would help a lot. So I definitely appreciate all those suggestions and ideas. And if you've got any more from the listening audience, feel free to jump into the chat. And with that, I know we've got a few questions that have come in that we'll get to. We've got about 10 minutes left. I think we've got at least 3 or 4 or 5 questions now. Let me grab. I've got the Q&A up, so let me just start at the top. I see a question from Bruce. Hey Bruce, would the prompt be triggered by the driver going into PCs? I think that was a question specific to the ATI pop-up tool that I mentioned earlier. So I was just pulling it up to make sure I had it right. But basically, that is exactly what it would do. So if you click to enter PC, it's going to go through the normal business, and then it's going to send you to a validation screen, and then that would link you over to your guidance on proper use, and then that'll give them a reminder every time, and you can set that up just for drivers that need it. So if you've got that 10% of the driver force that has any issues, or whoever you want to work with, you can enable it just for that group.
There's a question on here. Actually, I'm glad this question was asked. I want to address this one because this has been a thing for a while, and we've gone around about it. The question is, why can't ELDs automatically change PC status, right? And as I mentioned before, in Canada, you can, because it's written in code. And this has been a point that's gone back and forth. There's at one point it was vague, and there was some providers that put this in place, and FMCSA came in and clarified you can't, and they actively clarify that. The reason why is because the fact that PC is not codified in the hours of service regulations. So that's the first part of it. The second part is the way the mandate is written. We mentioned before that a driver has responsibility of his logs. The way the mandate is written today, only the driver can edit his logs. If an ELD has a mechanism that would automatically switch a driver out of PC to drive, it would be an edit by the carrier, because the carrier would set it. And so the reason for that is because it's not written in regulation to switch them out like it is in Canada. And then secondly, because of that, and that's not there, the mandate doesn't allow a carrier to edit logs. And again, by the very nature of it, if they set a limit and it forced them into drive, they would, the way FMCSA sees it, it would be editing their logs, which isn't allowed. You can only suggest if you're a carrier. So that's, I want to bring that because that's gone round and round for a while, and it recently came up when FMCSA went around and said you can't do it.
There was a related question that would be good to loop into this one. It's and around annotation for PC. And does it require annotating reason to use for each occurrence? And I think that's a rule, right? Every PC instance should be annotated.
Every
There's
time
not
you
typically a standard, list of reasons, but it's an open field for annotation.
Yep, it's for anytime you select PC, so you select off duty, select PC. When you select PC, you are required by the ELD mandate to annotate the reason why you're using PC, essentially the justification for it, which is why when I mentioned earlier is it's a good practice to train your drivers on how to annotate, and they don't put something like home or drive or QWERTY, whatever those things are, right? So, but it's an open field because there are multiple reasons why a driver might be using it. So,
And related comment from Phil on the PC item specific to Canada, basically said, confirmed obviously the maximum 75 kilometers, midnight to midnight. The machine automatically switches you back to driving when you use your time. And if the driver's educated on how to use it, it's a non-issue, And I think that's what we're saying too, right? Just
yes,
give us the rule to follow. And if you can train the drivers on it, the drivers can follow it if they know what to do, but leaving it ambiguous is kind of leaves too much gray area for everybody and it makes it hard to manage.
real quick, to Karen, you asked about TAT. It's TAT, Truckers Against Trafficking. If you type that in, you better get to their website with all the tools there.
And I think we're going to have a link in our slides towards the end too, or that'll get sent out. So you'll have a direct link. Otherwise, they're pretty easy to find if you look for Truckers Against Trafficking. I saw one other question I know that I can answer. That was from Kelsey. Hey, Kelsey. So around yard moves, and trucks moving over the weekend, essentially people that aren't on your team that are driving the truck over the weekend. So one tool that we have in our toolbox is automated yard move. So we can configure if you've got yards where it's going to be contained within that area and they can be designated as yard moves. We've got a tool that you can do that with. So if everything's contained on a yard and you can do that, that's something we can implement for you. Otherwise, what are you guys' suggestions if it's outside of a specific yard and you've got to manage time where you don't have a driver assigned to it? What do you guys do, Jill or Scott?
So when I'm reading this, is first thing is make sure the driver's logged out. They should be logging out at the end of the day, and then out of the ELD, and then if it's moved, it's unidentified driving time. But at that point, you annotate it with an explanation of that period of time. So that way, even though it's unidentified driving time, it's annotated, it's explainable in case it's inspected or audited, and it doesn't go in the driver's logs. If you don't have access to creating an exempt profile or creating a profile for those yard members, then that would be my suggestion is make sure the driver logs out before he leaves, and then and again, put it in policy to make sure that you have to log out before you leave. And then from there, if they don't, there's really not much that can be done with that.
Yeah, if they don't and the truck moves, they've got to sit there until it resets if they're out of time.
Yep. That's the whole, there is no golden, there's no silver bullet to edit drive time. If you don't log out, and their argument is you're responsible for logging out, and so be it until you get a reset. To your point.
Yeah, they only have to do that a time or two and they'll remember. Like if it goes to the shop and they don't log them out. Yeah, it's gotta play by the rules.
One other thing I'll note is that Geotab does have an ignore drive time feature. It doesn't edit drive time, but it allows the calculation to be done correctly. You'll still see it on the logs. You'd still see if you get pulled over, but it gives it an admin or whatever level of scrutiny you would want to have given the ability to do that. Then you can ignore drive time with a good reason. It'll still be visible. You'll still be able to see it, but at least your drivers can see the correct time if it's a valid reason to ignore it. like in that situation. So that's a pretty nice convenience versus some other systems I've dealt with before. We've got a few other questions. You guys see any, pick any out that would be good to answer? We've just got a couple of minutes left.
I will say, I think Jesse asked a question about, is there, he talked about separate regulations for independent contractors, owner operators, and company employees. So there has been discussion around, I don't know if it's, where it stands. I mean, all the stuff would have to go through AMPRM and NPRM and the whole process. But I know there has been some discussion from some organizations about having some differences, especially owner operators and driving home and so forth. But that discussion's ongoing, but nothing has been fleshed out at this point. But I think OIDA has talked about it, and I think CVSA has talked about it to some extent or another. But nothing's been really fleshed out about it. But the conversation's out there.
That's concerning to me, though. If you're an owner operator and you decide you want to go rogue, but you're still on my authority. So if you have a wreck or something horrible happens, that's still on our insurance.
Yeah, that's like I said. I think there's conflicting approaches to this because of different organizations, but I think, like I said, it's a topic, but it's got a ways to go. I mean, there's going to be so much conversation that has to be had before they actually figure out how they really want to do this with PC. I mean, they need to, but I think there's still a lot of conversation to get everybody in agreement.
Agreed.
And with the current tool set, generally, I know in Geotab, and I think generally probably most DLD providers, you've got the ability to configure it by driver, by group. So if you've got a single group of drivers that you want to run with a certain rule or a different set of standards, you're able to do that as it stands now. It would make sense to me that the rule's the same for everybody in the future, though, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Makes it, we don't want to add more confusion. So that's where you got to figure out what works across the board. But we'll see what comes of it.
I think I just saw one other question, maybe, and it's probably all the time we've got. That if a driver runs out of hours while looking for parking, do you recommend proceeding in violation of hours of service or switch to PC? Due to accidents or general congestion, due to running out of time waiting for roadside assistance, vehicle maintenance, etc. So what's when your back's against the wall and you're maybe going to have to drive, what's the best thing you guys recommend?
This comes into, it would, as it stands today, and Jill, I'd like to see what your take on this, but as it stands today, the guidance basically says if you have to get to Safe Haven, or you have to get to the most reasonable location, right? The first reasonable location. So if you have truck parking, I think that all fits under that guidance. Like, you can't go driving down the road and switch place, but if there's no place to park, it comes under Safe Haven. So I think the guidance covers that. I don't think there's an issue there. What's your thoughts on it, Jill?
Well, you could use that, or sometimes if it's not very far, we'll just let them go over hours and make a notation that, whatever circumstance happened. If we do that, it gives them less apt to maybe use that when they really shouldn't. It is what it is. A lot of times the officers, though, if the guys are nice and they're they appear to be honest, the officers will cut a little slack on that. And it makes sense. It's got to make sense. They didn't drive, another hour and a half to find a place to park. It was 2-3 minutes.
And Joel in the comments basically said the same. And that makes sense to me, right? It is what it is. You make a comment, you note that it happened.
Yeah. And I will say this to everybody listening. I stress this to everybody. This is the general rule. If you make a mistake, something changes, or there's a problem, annotate it. That's what it's there for. And that goes towards that conversation on roadside to show that, something happened, things happened. And so that's why they put annotations everywhere, so that you can put an explanation as to why something is off and that it can be taken into account and it shows good faith. So if there was an issue, annotate. If you're not sure, annotate. So, and I'll leave it there.
Right. I think we used our time and more. That was awesome discussion. Especially appreciate all the questions from the group. Here's some information. Yep, the Truckers Against Trafficking is there. CVSA, FMCSA, etc. Obviously, those are the official channels to get information on regulations and guidance. So, one last moment to thank Jill and Scott for joining and sharing their knowledge. You guys are very much appreciated. Thank you for doing it.
Thanks for letting us have the conversation. I think this is awesome.
Yeah,
And I
thank
think-
you. It's always
More-
fun hanging with Nate.
Yes. And the more we can talk about this stuff out in the open and get everybody involved, I think it's awesome. The more we can do.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank-
Appreciate you joining.
And thanks everybody for showing up.
Bye.